right. It's great to see so many people joining us today on such an important topic. For those who don't know me, I'm Darlene McLennan, and I'm the manager of the Australian Disability Clearinghouse on Education and Training, which is ADCET for short. My pronouns are she, her. I'm a white woman in my very late 50s. It's my last year of being 50. I have grey and brown hair with glasses, and I'm wearing actually a branded UTAS top today, which I realised, but it's very cold here in Launceston in Tasmania, so it's nice and cuddly. So that's the reason I'm using it. For those who haven't joined us before, we do have our webinar live caption, and to access those captions, you can click on the CC button in the toolbar that is located either at the top or the bottom of your screen. We also have captions available in the browser, and the team will add that to the chat now if you'd like to access our captions in a browser. ADCET is hosted by Lutruwita, Tasmanian Aboriginal land, and in the spirit of reconciliation, I want to respectfully acknowledge the Lutruwita nations and also recognise the Aboriginal history and culture of the land and pay my respects to elders, past and present, and to the many Aboriginal people who did not make elder status. I also want to acknowledge all the countries and lands from participants in this meeting, including our wonderful panel members, and also those people joining us online. I want to acknowledge the elders and ancestors and their legacy to us, and any Aboriginal and Torres Strait peoples joining the webinar today. Okay, today's webinar, hopefully you're in the right one. It's a panel session on disability action plans in universities. What actually works? Question mark, I'm asking. There's been significant changes across the university sector in recent times. And so it's timely that we stop and reflect and look at how something like a disability action inclusion plan can support and work alongside these changes. I'm using the word DAP or Disability Action Plan because that's what's used by the Human Rights Commission. But I also acknowledge that as a sector, we are diverse and people use different words like Disability Action and Inclusion Plan, Disability Inclusion and Action Plan, DAPE, DEEP, DOP, whatever. So lots of ways it's said, but ultimately that's what we're talking about today. When ADCET put out a call to universities for volunteers, it was great. We got a large number of responses. The people who are in the panel today, it's not reflective of that they're, the greatest, and ADCET's, totally endorsing it, but they all are the greatest and totally endorsing them. But it is about that everybody's at different journeys of different journeys within their DAP, in the DAP process within their own university. And so we just wanted to reflect that diversity. And I think we had a discussion previous to this where we talked about, it is a learning experience for all of us. We're all nothing's kind of perfect. We can always change and grow and so forth. So hopefully it'll be really reflective of that. This sector, and people who know me know that I say it regularly, we are one of the greatest sectors, I think, because we share and collaborate, and that we, are willing to do that. And I thank our panel members for agreeing to share their knowledge and skills with us today. So our panel members, we have Aaron Green, who is the Strategic Project Coordinator for the Disability, Neurodiversity and Chronic Illness Portfolio in Murdoch University. We have Belinda Johnson, an Associate Director of Accessibility and Inclusion from the University of Melbourne. We've got Kate Rooney, the Manager of Accessibility and Equity at Central Queensland University. Sam Hamilton, therefore known as Sam H, is the Project Officer at Charles Sturt University. And Sam Teenan, who is Sam T, going on, is the Associate Director, Accessibility and Inclusion Support at Charles Sturt University as well. Their bios are on the website. I could talk forever about all these fabulous people, but you can read more about them on the ADCET website. For those who have attended previous webinars, our sessions normally run for about an hour, but today, as it's a panel discussion, we've extended it to an hour and a half. I know that many of you, it's a large chunk out of your day, but we really appreciate your time. It's lovely to see so many so keen on this subject. But I also encourage you to stretch, stand throughout as you need. And I've also enabled the panel members at any time to turn off their camera and have a stretch because it's a big ask. As I said at the beginning, we do live caption this event. This is being captioned by the fabulous Helen from Capta 5 Live, and it will be recorded, and the recording will be available on ADCET in the coming days. We hope the panel discussion will go for around an hour or a little bit more, and then we'll open up to questions. As always, in our webinars, we really love that people give us emoji, kind of up voting, etc. That people have conversations in the chat with each other. So please continue to do that, and thank you for the love. So keep doing that. And if you do want to have chat, make sure you use everyone in the chat, not just to the back end people, so that everybody can see what you're saying. But if you have a question for the panel, if you could please put it in the Q&A box instead of the chat box, that makes it easier for us to find the questions. And you're able to upvote. So if we do get lots and lots of questions and we're not going to get time to answer them all, I will be choosing from the top mostly. So if you upvote, that should be I should be able to see that. And if you're not familiar with the Zoom environment, we didn't know what to call it, but there is somewhere in your Zoom environment capacity to change either to a gallery where you get to see all the panel members, or you get to see the speaker view. So really up to you. But if you're not familiar with the Zoom environment, you can change how you're experiencing this webinar. And if you like to see us all, then you can leave it on gallery, or you can go up and actually choose speaker view, and only the person speaking will be in your view. Okay, that's a lot from me. So thank you for listening. Now, thank you. Thank you, panel. It's fabulous to see you all. It's yeah, it's great. And the sun's come out here for me, so that's even more lovely. It's shining upon me as I ask the first question. So, firstly, I just want to ask, but can you tell us briefly about your disability action plan, where it sits in the university, and how long it has been running? So, Sam T, I'm going to ask you first to kick us off.
Thanks, Darlene, and thank you everybody for coming. Look, at Charles Sturt, I've been working here for about 9 years, so we've had a variety of disability action plans over that time with different structures, approaches, and length of how long the plan goes for, and who owns the plan and how it's created. So we've had times over that journey where we've had an expired plan for a period of time, and that time is the time still working on the new plan to deliver. So that's the situation we're in at the moment. Our current plan expired at the end of 25, and our new plan that we're working on is going to be released in December of this year. So my experience of plans is that over that journey, I've just seen an improvement of plans over time. I think that the maturity of executive members and the leadership within institutions gains knowledge about what these plans are supposed to drive and change, and stakeholder engagement that maybe some people didn't understand what the plan was a couple of plans ago, but they've seen it before and they're more attuned to be able to contribute. So that's our journey. So we're currently without a plan, but right in the middle of finish the consultation, and all of our stakeholders are required to have their actions inputted into our draft by the 17th of September for a release date in December of this year.
Fabulous. Thank you, Sam T. Aaron.
Sorry, yes. So actually, very, very similar story to Sam T, in that ours expired at the end of last year. We've been through some extensive consultation and working through to get the new plan together. And just as we were about to finalize, the lovely new DSF, and I mean that sincerely, not sarcastically, the lovely new DSF guideline requirements came out with the new requirement for a workforce inclusion strategy and education inclusion strategy. And because of those two new strategies, we're in talks about how we can reduce the scope of different plans across the university, so people aren't having to work to 3 different plans. So yeah, right now we're working out how to get the plan that was nearly finished to work alongside these new strategies. And it's been really eye-opening to see how people have moved and responded to these new governance responsibilities that universities have in the higher education sector, and to see how we can focus those particular areas, education and workforce, and replicate those in our DAP, or over here in the West, we call them DAPEs, Disability Access and Inclusion Plans. But yeah, so that's sort of has been held up. Not held up, but that's where we're at now in sort of trying to work with these new governance requirements and get our data to align with those, so we're not asking too much of our stakeholders and action owners to replicate across 3 different plans.
Fabulous. Hence the perfect timing, I think, of this conversation. Belinda.
Yeah, thanks, Darlene. I will note that I am speaking from the unceded lands of the Wurundjeri people here in Naarm. And I guess I also just wanted to start with a bit of a broader acknowledgement of some of the grief, loss and anxiety that people will be feeling this week in light of the NDIS changes. And my voice is breaking up at precisely the wrong time, but it's certainly something I'm feeling. So I just want to send love to everyone who's feeling that at the moment. I guess like Sam, we've been on a journey with our Disability Inclusion Action Plans. So I'll call them DAPs. Hope that doesn't create too much confusion. So we have just launched our second whole of university DAP. So that covers both staff and students. That was launched on the 30th of June. The previous plan, 23 to 26, was our first whole of uni plan. And I think before that, we had maybe 1 or 2, but they had been students only. In terms of where it sits in the university, it sits in the Office of the Provost, which is where my team is. So we're the diversity and inclusion team. I'm so sorry. I do not know why my voice is doing this at this moment. Sits with the diversity and inclusion team, and we have the kind of broad oversight responsibility for development and implementation, but of course ownership of actions are shared across the university and really owned by our university executive as the responsible leads.
Great. Thank you. We'll let you have a cough and a bit of water. Thank you, Belinda. That's great. That's very good. And Kate, just lastly for you.
So our plan is called the Disability Informed Action Plan because we really wanted to emphasize that this plan is really informed by the experiences of staff and students with disability. And I guess, so this is the inaugural plan under that title. It is built on earlier disability action plans, but I guess the extent of consultation and some of the co-design process that we've used is different with this plan. So that's the name. And our plan, a little bit like Belinda, it's an institutional plan. It sits in the university plan, which means it strategically cascades into divisional plans so that everyone knows what they have to do and the responsibility is distributed.
That's fabulous. So Kate, staying with you and the name changes is fabulous. So you're talking about that engagement of staff and students. What kind of things or how did you go about engaging and getting that engagement level from staff and students with disability in the process?
So the consultation process was long. We began by rolling out a survey to students who we work with, who work with accessibility and equity. And we actually reached out to our good colleagues at UQ. So the UQ Union Disability Collective Survey report. There were some fabulous researchers who'd already done a survey, so who generously agreed to let us borrow that, and we modified that for our students, and we also modified the survey for staff as well. And that getting those surveys, getting that feedback gave us a really good evidence base. It helped us to identify what was going well, what the barriers are, and really, I guess, helped us focus on some priorities rather than making assumptions. And then that was the starting point. And then we established some working groups with staff and students who reviewed the survey results and then considered what might be meaningful and achievable actions based on the elements of the survey.
Fabulous. Thank you. Belinda, is there anything how are you feeling now?
Yeah, I
It's
think my voice is back.
great.
Yeah.
So involving staff and students, what kind of strategies or how did Uni of Melbourne go around about with that?
Yeah, look, a bit similar to Kate's experience. Uh, we, in terms of developing the new DApp, was a bit of a two-phase process. So we went very wide in the evaluation of the previous plan. So we used staff and student surveys as well as focus groups. We also established a disability inclusion action plan reference group, which brought together people with implementation responsibilities under the plan, as well as subject matter and lived experience experts. And really focused also on building our lived experience networks. So we had a relatively small, it was called a staff lived experience advisory group, which kind of rebadged for reasons I'm not fully cognizant of as the staff disability roundtable. That had been quite a small group. They scaled up ahead of the development process, which meant we had a group of 70 or so staff with disability and carers to have input into the development process. And we also established a student disability projects panel, which is a small group of students with disability who we pay on a casual basis to participate in some of this strategic work with us. So they were also really important partners in the development of the new plan.
That's great. Very comprehensive there too. So, Charles, Uni, anything else that you wanted to add in regards to engagement of staff and students? Anything different to our previous?
Yeah, I can jump in there, Darlene. How did we go about engaging staff and students with disability in the plan? Well, I guess as Sam T mentioned, we're still in the process of developing our plan. So I'll just talk to consultation. But we were after feedback from staff, students, alumni with lived experience, as well as allies, carers, colleagues, and staff who support students with disability. So we had a big challenge was how do we hear from such a broad range of people when time and attention and capacity are already stretched. There's a few sort of structural things going on at our university at the moment, like a university-wide restructure in the process. There's 2 Tier 1 initiatives being rolled out. There's lots going on. So we really needed to think about how we consulted and who was listening. And I guess to do that, we just looked at making the consultation as accessible as possible. Of course, starting with the assumption that not one way of consultation will work for everybody. So we developed a web page, which was our consultation hub, and that was the vehicle for providing different choices for ways people could provide feedback. The hub also was a place where people could learn more about the plan and the process that we were sort of hoping to go through, and then choose how they wanted to engage. So we had a staff, student, and an alumni survey that was available on the hub. We had an ideas wall that was really effective way for people to put quick pieces of feedback. We had on the hub there was people could register for workshops, so we held workshops on campus and online, and we went across 5 regional campuses in New South Wales. The hub also had an option for people to provide a more detailed submission. So they could choose whether they wanted to do that via email, audio, video, however they would like to share their thoughts. And the hub also held dates and promotion for our sort of pop-up consultations, which we also held over the regional campuses. For the workshops and for the pop-ups, we had lots of incentives for students. We had coffee vouchers and snacks at our pop-ups, and that seemed to really help our level of engagement. We had vouchers for students who attended the workshops, and that was really helpful. I think one of the most valuable decisions we made was putting a video on that consultation hub, where really just explained what the plan was and how people could contribute. But we had a student with lived experience co-design the video, the script for the video, and also to present that. And really, it was the involvement of that student that sort of co-design process was probably more valuable than the actual video itself, because she really identified things that we had missed in our language as we were, forming up our consultation, and help us sort of rethink some of the things that actually needed explaining. So yeah, we had provided lots of choice for people. That was one of the ways that we could engage.
Yep. And it probably goes to that concept of universal design for learning as well, is multiple means of engagement. So
Yeah.
yeah, good walking in the talk of what we do. So that's fabulous. Thank you. When I asked a question around the update and plans, you did kind of let us know about where often the plan does sit. But sometimes in the sector, sometimes disability, it feels like, it's terrible to say, but some people within universities say, oh, they're your students, to the disability team, or that kind of language is often used. So, with a disability plan, it often is about ownership and making sure that the whole institution owns it. So how do you build that ownership beyond disability and beyond the disability and equity teams and so forth? So, Kate, is there anything that you've done in your institution that's kind of built more of an institutional ownership of the plan?
With a lot of the actions and ideas that were cultivated, we really had to involve responsibility areas in decisions about those actions. And I think what's really important for us is that we had to make sure that the actions were actually realistic and achievable, because there were several times when we had to go and get further information. We had to cost out actions. We had to make sure that they could be put into the workflow. So getting that buy-in really involved understanding both what our students and staff wanted, but also understanding the practical realities on the ground. We didn't get pushback at all, but we were scrutinized, and we had to work with responsibility areas to make sure that the actions were achievable in the time frame and that they were realistic.
Yeah.
And involving those responsible areas was critical.
Yeah. No, I remember many years ago, showing the facilities people at a university about what their responsibility was under their DAP, and they'd never even seen it. And I was like, and where's the budget for this? It's like, yeah. So it is really important to kind of build that ownership. So definitely. The consultation, I mean, that's one of the really key parts to get that ownership and making sure that all voices are heard, not just those with lived experience, but, those that are doing, the other people are doing jobs as well. So I kind of wrote up a question around, that what's harder than expected for you in the consultation process. So, Belinda, was there anything that surprised you or you felt that was harder than you thought when you started out this process or during this process that you're going through?
I think you've sort of covered it in your comments around the previous question. It wasn't unexpected, but I think that challenge of getting buy-in from areas that continue to think that it's a D&I team responsibility rather than a shared responsibility, is probably one of the biggest challenges. We also went through that process of meeting with the implementation owners, taking, our evaluation findings to them in a way that was kind of tailored to their specific areas, and really making sure that we were working through achievable actions together rather than saying, here's an action, now go away and do it. But that said, even with all that evidence and kind of briefing, there were still pockets where the level of disengagement was pretty significant, and there was a kind of view that, you know, this has come from nowhere. What do you mean we should be doing this? And, you know, by and large, I would say people come to this with good intentions and will come around in the end, but often it is that anxiety about resourcing that is the real kicker. You know, people are already really stretched doing what they thought was their job. So we've really tried to focus in how we talk about the new plan on embedding accessible practice as business as usual. So, you know, yes, there are some things that require investment or resourcing, but this is also just about changing the way you go about the job you do anyway. So we're trying to get that message across.
Yeah. It's a great point. I think it's a bit like even with the implementation of UDL, I think often sometimes people feel they're overwhelmed or their job's too big and it's too hard. And that's why we kind of use the +1 model. Maybe we kind of also need to kind of bring something like this into a DAP around so it's not overwhelming. Any other panel that wants to answer that question around what they've thought might have been harder? It's okay if not, but so
Yeah, I
just
can jump in there, Darlene. Something for us was was harder than we thought was we got we got a lot more feedback than we expected, which was fabulous, but we kind of underestimated how much time and how complex that analysis piece really was. So, you know, the challenge wasn't identifying the broad themes, but it's again how to bring all that feedback together without losing the nuance and the complexity of people's lived experience. And that sort of sense making part took us a lot longer than we had anticipated. So I think, yeah, that was certainly a lot harder than we thought. And we certainly had to bring in some people with expertise in that area to help us with that. But yeah, there's that tension between simplifying the feedback and creating those workable themes that aren't just reduced to dot points. And yeah.
Yeah. Oh, excellent. Thank you. Now, we probably didn't talk about this prior, but if any of the panel do want to jump in, just feel free to put your hand up as well. Hopefully the hand up button's there for you, but I will kind of, you know, give a little time if people want to jump in as well. So the next question I had was, what's the gap between what's written in your plan and what's happening on the ground, and how do you keep momentum about, you know, like so the energy doesn't fade? And I know, Belinda, that Uni of Melbourne have just recently released theirs, so you probably haven't had the lull yet. But is there anything you're kind of thinking about how to keep this plan energized within the Uni of Melbourne?
Yeah, thank you. It's a really good question, and it's one that we've certainly given a lot of thought to, particularly as, you know, we did have that experience a number of times through the consultation and development process where people hadn't heard of our DAP, didn't know it existed, and or knew about it, but you know, said, well, I saw it was released, but then I never heard anything about any of the actions. I have no idea whether they've been done or not. So we are thinking through at the moment a communication strategy around how we communicate progress to the broader university community. You know, we'll start a kind of a roadshow shortly so that we're getting out to, particularly to faculties who often feel at a distance from some of these centrally owned plans, even though they are you know, a key part of the delivery of the commitments. We are in an increasingly resource constrained environment, and that does you know, that does create some pressure as well. And I think some creative thinking around how we you know, how we deliver on some of the commitments.
Yeah, no, that's great. Aaron, I might go to you just in regards because you spoke about your plan being stalled because of the new changes in some ways. So, but you have gone through quite a process of developing the plan. Was there things that kind of moved for for Murdoch in that consultation? What kind of, energy kind of got created?
Yeah, so we took a very similar approach to Kate, Belinda, and Sam, or both Sams, sorry, in that we started with a very lengthy internal consultation process with people with experience of disability, so both students and staff. So through the months of September and August last year, I held like daily drop-in sessions for staff and students to come in and engage with the Disability Access and Inclusion Plan feedback process. We had, again, multiple formats of engagement to ensure that people could contribute in the ways that suited them best. So we had online surveys. I made myself available for one-to-one interviews if people didn't feel safe enough to talk in a group environment. We had a group environment where people would come and share their ideas and bounce around in that format. But we took a further step in that we went to community peak bodies like the Youth Disability Advocacy Network and People with Disability WA, and we actually paid people with community members to participate in a broader, I guess, consultation process from the perspective of what stops you, or what are the barriers to you working or studying in the higher education environment, so we could sort of make sure that we're catering to our future students and our future employees alongside our current ones. So what really motivated for us was that we did get, again, the same problem that I think others experienced, was that wealth of feedback and how to turn that into actual practical actions that in a resource confined environment we could see and to translate into work that's going to progress access and inclusion from where it is today to somewhere in the future, to be better in the future. What motivated a lot of people was being able to, so I made the mistake of synthesizing all that data down into a list of actions that the community were asking for, and taking those to stakeholders and saying, here are the actions the community are asking for. What can we deliver? What can we achieve from this? And what I didn't realize at the time was I was taking, I guess, some level of power agency away from those stakeholders to sort of look at what the problems are and come up with the solutions that work to their environment. So what I found was when I reconfigured or refocused that approach and went to the stakeholders with, okay, here is the list of the main barriers or main themes identified by internal and external stakeholders. How can we work within the scope of your remit? So whether it's professional staff or student support services or the academic team, to make the changes that would help remove these barriers for current students, current employees, and our potential future students or employees looking to come here. And that really, giving them that power and that agency, led them to be a little bit more excited, a little bit more involved in what was happening, rather than me coming into and saying, hey, here's a bunch of actions I need you to do over the next 5 years. So that's was my biggest learning environment, to get people on side and energized for it.
It's brilliant. Thank you for your honesty. It's probably how I would approached it and have learnt that way as well. So I think, I've got all the answers. Come on, let's go. And I think agency, is a really important word, I think, in this whole process. So thank you for that. Anybody else want to make comment about if there's anything about the plan that was stalled or moved? That okay. Yep, go
Darlene,
Kate. Yep.
I just wanted to say that I guess the gap is that sometimes the implementation is uneven, because some of the actions gain momentum really quickly because some people are energized or it aligns with the work that they're currently doing, but others take a bit longer because of the systems or there are dependencies. So I think we probably just need to acknowledge that. We did the same thing as Belinda. After we had the plan, we had a great launch as well, but we have a communications plan that keeps people connected to the plan. And we think it's really important to acknowledge achievement, because it's important to show that the DAP is producing tangible outcomes, that people are doing the work, and that everyone can get involved. So one small thing that we're doing is encouraging anyone who is involved in an action to just have a little stamp, this is a DAP aligned initiative. So it's visible and it's it's kind of the words are floating around the university, and that keeps people curious. But we're only a year in, but we just thought that would be really helpful at this point.
That's a great idea. It's excellent. I think it's one of the challenges. Yeah, definitely. But also, I think the A in for me in often these plans is that action. Because often I've seen, where you've seen a plan and you actually don't actually know of the action or how it's being achieved or if it's been achieved or all those things of how it's written. So, Belinda, like with yours, like what does your plan measure and how is it reported on and what happens if something isn't done? Is that something that you've kind of faced at Melbourne or looking at how you work through that?
Um, Yeah, so I think that what happens if something isn't done question is
Yep.
a really interesting one, because that's certainly a strong theme that came through some of the lived experience consultation was, well, there's no consequence if nothing gets done. And that is quite a hard one to manage. In terms of measurement, though, this is one of my favourite topics. I started at the university 2 years ago, so towards the end of the previous plan. I had come from government, so doing the Victorian State Disability Plan, the Autism Plan, work towards Australia's disability strategy. That has such a strong focus on outcomes, measures, and indicators. So took the risk of kind of bringing that approach to the new DF and saying, hey, we really need to be saying what it is we're delivering and how we're going to measure that. So the new plan does have a set of outcomes and makes a clear statement about the measures and indicators for what we're aiming to achieve. We do have regular progress reporting as well up to our university executive. But progress on delivering actions only tells part of the story. It really is that focus on how we're going to show that we're actually having an impact and making a difference that I think is really important. But that question of what happens if something isn't done, I mean, certainly, the point of the reporting to university executive, and the oversight of the plan is with a subcommittee of university executive, which is called the Diversity, Equity and Inclusion Subcommittee, which we like to call DISCO. And I always like to say that it sounds more fun than it actually is. But, DISCO is very senior leadership. And the point of that reporting is for them to look at where there are blockers, where things aren't progressing the way we would want them to, and to think about, how we support each other to achieve those things.
That's great. Thank you. Ray posted a lovely comment in the comment box of however beautiful the strategy, you should occasionally look at the result, which Winston Churchill said. So that's a lovely quote. Thank you. So that's fabulous. The next one was around if there's resistance. And I know, Aaron, you spoke about, presenting the actions and got some resistance. Is there any other resistance that you experienced and what kind of strategies did you do to overcome those?
Yeah, I think we touched a bit on it earlier. It was largely the biggest resistance I met was coming to people, and it was always coming down to budget and resourcing. And what it took to get past that was to really communicate that these are 5-year plans. They are also living plans. They can be updated and changed at any point in time with the Department of Communities or whichever governing body monitors yours in your state. But what that means is that the work doesn't need to start this current year, because a lot of it was like, well, I've already allotted my budget for this year. I can't do any of this action, any of these actions. I don't have anything to resource to this. But what I sat with them and sort of reframed it is in that this year can be your planning year. This year can be just working out what you need to do to reach these goals or these KPIs or these actions. And then next year, we can start looking at what we can resource or what we can do with the budgets that come in for the next year's one. It doesn't need to all be, the plan doesn't need to be achieved this year, doesn't need to be resourced this year, despite it going live and publishing. We can work with the small wins, the tangible actions that are already sort of got momentum in place that we can continue and grow from there. And then, yeah, that I found people were starting to come around to that idea because it was that conception of, oh no, I need to immediately be working on this as soon as I sign my name to it, or as soon as I subscribe my name to an action, I need to immediately start work on that. And that was a lot of, I don't want to do that because I don't know that I can do that. I don't want to look like I'm going to fail if I don't do that. But then softening that sort of approach of, okay, you can use this year, and if you need to, part of next year to look at how you're going to achieve these things, and then look at how that might work into your budget, because it then also gives you time to go to the various governing committees and say, like campus development or whatnot, and say, look, hey, to achieve this real meaningful outcome, we would like to see an increase in funding for the next couple of years. So that kind of took away a lot of pressure off the stakeholders' shoulders to sort of commit to and get involved in it, and that sort of not grease the wheels, but sort of got them a little more on board, willing to sign their name to the actions they could come up with.
That's great. A great approach. Thank you. So the next question I have was, how do you know whether the plan is working? What does meaningful feedback look like? And, yeah, and so anybody want to make comment to that? So, Linda, is there something yep?
Yeah, I'm happy to. So we've talked about our outcomes and measures, but I think in terms of meaningful feedback, our staff disability roundtable are just such crucial partners in how we go about this work. So the staff disability roundtable is co-chaired by representatives of a smaller working group who kind of do the agenda setting for the broader roundtable. So co-chaired by members of that group and our Pro Vice Chancellor, People and Equity. So it is both a staff network for kind of mutual support for staff with lived experience, but also kept quite close to the work of coordinating and overseeing the implementation of the plan. And that means we get to hear directly from those staff on a regular basis about where things are and aren't working. Likewise, our Student Disability Projects panel are, again, a really important source of feedback. I guess I would say the kind of the really big ticket item in terms of the student focused work is around implementing the recommendations of a review of our student equity and disability services area. So there was a big review done under the previous plan, and now in the new plan it is actually implementing those recommendations. And it's a really significant scaling up and change in the model in terms of how we support students with disability. So I know that that is another critical avenue for student feedback about improvements to the student experience. So yeah, I guess it's maintaining that regular communication. The Staff Disability Roundtable also has representatives on both the DAP reference group and a number of the working groups that are focused on specific projects under the plan. So it is about keeping that quite structured and deliberate link with lived experience groups.
That's great. Thank you.
Excuse me, Darlene.
Yep.
It's Sam. I just wanted to drop in, not necessarily to that question, but a bit of a sum up of what I've heard so far and maybe some thoughts from me. Sam mentioned our consultation. What I really loved about the consultation from ours was that often the rest of the institution might think, oh, that's just one student complaining about one thing. There's no weight behind those small little things that people put forward. But with our consultation and the way we themed it, we said 71 times that come up in the feedback or whatever. And that was really gave weight to those stakeholders to value that feedback instead of just thinking of the odd complainer. So that's just one point. And I think that the consultation and the way that was done has really helped us to get the stakeholder buy-in for addressing that and seeing those pain points very clearly themed in that feedback. How do you keep the energy up? Well, champions. Our team's champions, and you know that there's some real winners in your institution. I know every institution's different, but we're regional. We kind of know each other. There's not as much hierarchy at our institution, and so people get behind people. And also, I think one of the winning things about how things can change with these plans moving forward is often it's true that there's business as usual. We need to think about that in the way that we improve the experience for students and staff. But the Disability Support Fund actually gives us some money to actually move some of those actions or partially fund some things or get some ideas with some energy and traction behind them. And so that is certainly something for me that although many people may not think that that's a lot of money for our institution, it's a lot of money, the DSF funding, and so greatly thankful for it and using that as the leverage for energy to say, cool, how could we work together to apply for these funds? Do they fit the guidelines? What bit of money could you give from your area to contribute to this? What could I possibly find in the fund? And so I feel like it's a real opportunity shift and that the government's actually seeing that, you know, these things, we need a bit of help to get them moving too. So that's just a bit of a summary of some thoughts.
Fabulous, thank you. I realise I haven't taken any notes, and I might call on you, Sam, to sum up at the end. Something you've all said such great things, and I want to kind of sum it all up at the end. But so keep saying great things. I'll start to try to write them down. Now I'm going to play a Time Lord. I'm going to offer you the opportunity to go back in time, and what would be one thing you would do differently if you got to start your plan again or this process again? What's kind of one thing that you would do differently? So I might go to you, Sam H, first.
Thanks, Darlene. I guess, as I mentioned earlier, I would plan and resource the analysis part differently, and the expertise that's needed. That's certainly top of mind. But I think what we would possibly have done differently is started the conversations earlier, much to what everybody has mentioned. Get the plan on people's radar earlier. Talk informally about what we're trying to achieve. Give people more time to understand where they might fit, or before formally asking for input and sharing the feedback that we've received. Just spend more time working out who really needs to be involved, who needs to be in the room when we're sharing the feedback. Building relationships and with particular people in particular areas who are going to help us champion and have a say. Before asking for input, I guess, we were working on a tight time frame and lots happened quickly. I guess if we were to do it again, we'd probably take a little bit more gradual approach and have conversations earlier that would make later conversations about actions and ownership maybe a little easier. Sort of develop that sort of shared understanding sooner. Excellent.
Aaron, was there anything you wanted to add to that section?
Yeah, look, because I came in, this was a new role created in the last 3 years at Melbourne University. I wasn't involved in setting the previous plan, and it's now become the responsibility of our office and my role specifically. So for this particular consultation, as Sam said, I would have started earlier. I naively gave myself 6 months, thinking there'd be enough time because it's such a structured and formulated document with expectations of what's in each area. I figured 6 months, like continual work for 6 months, would be enough to hit that. But when it comes to reaching to your stakeholders, making sure you get a decent amount of, or give people enough time to come and give that actual feedback, 6 months really crunches your work time on it. However, to properly answer, now that it does sit with our office and sits with me going forward, the way that I will mitigate that and the way I'd like to approach that is that because these are considered living documents, and I've been working quite closely with the Department of Communities here in WA to understand just what regulations there are around plan updates, plan refreshes, and the lovely director who's been working with me has been very it's really reducing the stress around the compliance level of it, because I think, as Linda mentioned earlier, that there is no sort of consequences that come with not meeting the plans, which is unfortunate, because obviously then it doesn't give us the tools required to say, hey, this is something we need to do. We're like, well, why? There's no consequences if we don't. But the director helped me remove that stress around the compliance that way, and saying, look, the plans can be updated at any point the university or your organization wants to update them. So I guess the short answer would be, I'm going to, now that I have it, now that once this one's drafted and submitted, I'll be treating it like a living document. I'll be touching base every review process and saying, this is what we've completed, going back to the stakeholders and asking them if they'd like to improve or change any actions they have for next year. So that way we're submitting something regularly, so it becomes more of a, rather than just a 3 or 5 year block document, it'll become progressively updated to reflect the work that we have done and the new work we want to do to expand that.
That's great. Thank you, Aaron. So I hope you enjoyed that time travel.
Darlene,
Yes, yeah, go,
I just
Kate.
wanted to say, and what I wanted to say is, if I'd done things again, I would have paid the students. We got such incredible feedback from the students in the working groups, and it really was so helpful. If I had it all over again, we would have valued that experience by paying them.
Yeah, thank you. And that probably leads, what do they call, the good segues into the Disability Support Fund. So we are kind of talking, something that some people on this webinar might know. If you actually search on ADCET for the Disability Support Fund, you'll get to read more information around the big changes that have happened for the sector. These changes are now based in the Higher Education Act. So there's lots of governance around that. And I think as some of the panel discussed, the plan was on the way, and then we've got a new legislation and new requirements and so forth, and we don't want to see them as separate. So yeah, has it shifted how your university is approaching the Disability Action Plan, how you're combining the need for a strategy and the workforce strategy? Yeah, so Belinda, I might throw to you for that one.
Sure. Hasn't necessarily shifted the way we're doing the DAP. I would say I breathed a sigh of relief when the department confirmed that that the separate student and workforce inclusion strategies could in fact be combined into one strategy or plan. That's certainly very helpful for those of us who have those consolidated plans. And again, but getting back to my favourite outcomes and measures topic, I was also I felt vindicated seeing that that there is a requirement around KPIs as well. So in terms of the plan, it's for us, it gives more weight and support to the need to have a plan. There's been plenty of advocacy for years around wanting to see strengthen requirements in relation to disability action plans generally. The DDA hasn't delivered that yet. It would be nice to see that as an outcome of the review of that. But this certainly helps us make the case, particularly, and I don't know if this is other people's experience, but there is, I think, in the DEI space, a bit of plan fatigue that you have to battle through. I often hear, oh, we've got so many plans, we've got so many actions, there's too much. So this helps strengthen the case for why we need to have disability action plans. The governance side is a whole other thing, though, obviously, that is creating a lot of work for all of us. Ultimately, I think to a good end, but it's certainly a significant shift.
Yeah. Thank you for that. And that was one of the other, so we've actually moved away from my questions and moving into the questions we got pre. So people who are registered get asked if they have a question. And one of the questions was, how do we effectively integrate the action plan with all the inclusion plan and culture strategies and all the other things. And I know in some of the conversations that we've had around the country is that people have gone, yeah, we've got so many plans, all right, we've just completed our, social and inclusion strategy or whatever. So I think there is sometimes could be that risk of fatigue or too much. Is there any examples that people have got that they've kind of combined, or it's helped kind of launch some other ways of approaching the plans within their own universities? So, Aaron, I'm noticing you nodding. So, yeah.
I just want to give other people a chance to jump in before I spoke. So please, if anybody else like to, before I start rambling, by all means. But so yes, one of the ways we still haven't. I will caveat this by saying the SLT have not approved the approach as of yet, but the main one that is leading at the front is that because they're two very specific focused plans, so one around workforce, one around education. The education one will sit with our Deputy Vice Chancellor of Education, and the workforce inclusion strategy will sit with our Chief People Officer to develop, because the actions of the strategy will align most likely with does align directly with their responsibilities, their remits. But how that will be managed is that the KPIs they set in their strategies will be actions that end up in our disability access and inclusion plan. So therefore, the university has these guiding strategies that outline the KPIs they're trying to improve over the next 3 to 5 years in terms of access to inclusion for employees and for students. But the work to actually achieve those outcomes will be contained with our disability access and inclusion plan. So as a whole, the university is only having to work to one document, to one action plan, but we have those guiding strategies as sort of the comms piece around what we're trying to achieve through the disability access and inclusion plan, what the university is trying to achieve for our employees with disability, for our students with disability. And that's the leading way that we're looking at the moment, so that we're not ending up with 3 different documents we're having to work to and report KPIs against. So it'll be contained within the one. So almost like a funnel where the strategy is at the top, is a broad thing, and the disability access and inclusion plan is a spout where all the actions and the work comes through.
Great, thank you. Any other comments?
I just wanted to say, Darlene, it's Kate speaking, that I think it is tricky because there's so many directives that are that come from external to the university, but I think we can effectively integrate our plans with other strategies by using compatible language and objectives, and making sure there's no conflicting commitments, identifying when actions overlap, just some practical things like that.
Hi, Darlene. It's Sam T from Chostet. I agree, Kate. It's one of the parts of our last plan was connected plans. So sometimes you can achieve that same action through something that already had existed, and that some recognition that they're being worked on in another way, and that's contributing. And so that was very, very helpful for stakeholders to see that some of the work that they're doing in other pieces lines up across the board. So that would just be one comment about how that stakeholder engagement was easier when there was this scene that they're not all, and it's hard, isn't it? Because all of these plans have come at different times, and we're not all in, I reckon around the table, everybody listening, we're all at different points in joining them all up and making it make sense and trying to decrease the work, because we all don't want to be sitting here creating plans. We want to be out doing the doing to improve the outcomes and the situation for our staff and students. And I think the other language that's coming through, and I know that this might come up in further questions, is that concept of universal design for learning. Now, the DSF funding has had more of a focus and sort of talking about that language in accessibility inclusion. We all understand the importance of universal design for learning, but have had no weight to kind of really push other elements of the institution to sort of see the value in that, and that even the fact of having the Disability Support Fund to assist with universal design, and see, rather than us saying, oh, you're not doing it, we can work in partnership together to lift the dial and improve things. So it's just a totally different language and conversation. And I think our institution is becoming more mature in seeing that we're not just improving things for the few people with a disability. Whatever we do improves the experience for everybody. So I think that, we're right at the start of that we've got a long journey to go, but I feel very optimistic about where things are heading. And, I've been here for 9 years. I've seen improvements. I think we're exponentially just going to see improvements and more buy-in and more energy and more creativity and more, all of us are in it together. So.
Yep, brilliant. Well said. Thank you. There was a question around the pragmatic universal design principles, like someone had asked around some examples of UD principles implemented in higher ed. And Sam T, you were saying you were happy to kind of talk a little bit more about that. And you've just kind of touched on it then.
Yeah, I wanted to be a bit honest. I think it's a journey. I think we're at the start of the journey. And I think everyone in institutions has a different view on where we are with UDL. We learn in this job that everybody has their own bucket. And an academic may be teaching a subject and maybe a subject matter expert, but maybe not have the skills for designing a perfect subject in the LMS. They're still a great academic, but it's the technical knowledge or the understanding of what needs to be provided and how do we give resources and checklists to them to be able to uplift their skills to deliver not just the subject matter expertise, but how the subject looks. And then it's when it's beyond the academic's ability to do that and it's some other technical expert or some other part of the institution that helps to lift the bar, have minimum expectations about what a subject looks like. Sometimes what we think with our knowledge are simple things is not obvious to other people. And so, for me, again, I think that there's a variance, but an ability to all move and shift. And we're at the start and there's lots of work to do, but lots of interest and energy in pockets. We just need to make that more expansive.
Yep. Thank you. Now another question. Oh, yep. Go, Belinda.
Yeah, thanks. Yes, that great point. I just wanted to flag that one of the things that I think is working really well for us that was established under the previous plan was that we have built a community of practice around inclusive learning. So it's called the Community of Inclusive Learning, or COIL. Strong, not just universal design, but certainly universal design for learning is a strong theme in that group, and is really quite beautifully bringing together both academic and professional staff with an interest in inclusive learning in UDL to share ideas and innovations. And one of the things I've really liked seeing is examples from champions from across different disciplines talking about how they are starting to implement UDL principles in, the way they teach statistics, or, things where you're sometimes told there are huge barriers to doing things in a kind of, universally designed way, but people are doing that and they're able to share that knowledge through the community of practice. So that's made a huge difference, I think.
That's great. I'm loving these names. Disco, Coil, they're all well done. One of the other questions, and you probably have answered that throughout, is the KPIs and how do you choose to focus on items. Is there anything else that you haven't said, like if people, anybody could answer this around how you worked out your KPIs or what the focus should be? So
I'm happy to speak a bit to that.
Yeah. Okay.
So in terms of identifying and articulating the outcomes for our plan, we did a lot of that work with the Staff Disability Roundtable and the Student Disability Projects Panel. So really wanted the lived experience ownership of how we framed the outcomes. The other thing I was really conscious of in setting our measures and indicators was to try wherever possible to use available data. So having come from government, there was a period, particularly in Victorian government, where there was a lot of interest in not restricting yourself to available data, but, you know, being aspirational about your measures, and, you know, setting things so that you would have measures in future. But unfortunately, then when it comes to accounting against the outcomes you've said you'd achieve, you can't measure them. So we've also tried to be really very realistic in terms of what measures we then matched against the outcomes that our lived experience groups wanted to see.
Thank you.
Darlene,
Yeah.
it's Kate. I was just going to say that's probably our weakest area of our institutional plan. And with the DSF changes, we're revisiting and strengthening the plan by adding KPIs. But I think it's really hard to measure inclusion. And, you know, I don't know if anyone's got any suggestions there, but obviously I feel, you know, that consultation process at the beginning really needs to continue all the way through, because we need to know that the experience of staff and students is changing. And that's dynamite. And I would actually welcome any ideas that people have about that. Because I think that is the crux of knowing if our plans are working. Is it improving the experiences of people? Is the plan improving the experiences of people with disability in our institutions?
Thank you.
Belinda speaking, can I jump in?
Keep going.
Absolutely agree. And we use a mix of survey data. So yes, there are the kind of standard, you know, quilt, SES data for students, and then, you know, every university has its own kind of staff experience surveys. But what we found was they weren't necessarily asking the questions that really went to that experience of feeling welcome and included and having the things you need to do your job or to learn. So for that reason, we've also had to establish a kind of more bespoke student survey and staff survey tool as well, and we'll need to you know, run those a few times, I think, through the life of the plan.
Fabulous. All right, well, now we're over to your questions. So we have got a Q&A box happening, and there's a couple of upvotes in there. So I don't think we probably won't get to all of them. We've got 20 minutes or less to go, but I will start going through them. Please feel happy to upvote if you want to, anything that in particular you want to hear about or add your questions. The challenge with the upvoting, it doesn't actually put them up. That's there's probably a most recent. Here we go. I can click most upvotes. There you go. Am I clever? How many years have I been using this technology? I've just learnt that. All right. So with 4 votes, a question we've got is: national law gives students rights, but much enforcement depends on individuals disclosing disability, requesting adjustments, negotiating with the institution, and sometimes making complaints. That creates an uneven practice, even when formal legal obligation is national. How are the panel addressing this? So I suppose this is it is an individual student, but do you think DAPs have a kind of impact on that student experience, and I suppose also, do your DAPs actually cover off like a student complaints and how they do that and how it's followed through? Has anybody got some good examples in their action plans?
It's Aaron speaking. I'll just jump in. So I don't know about this required structure of DAPs or DAPs on the East Coast, but in WA, we have 7 criteria that each DAP needs to cover, and one of those primary areas is complaints. So one of the recurring themes that sort of arose a lot was transparency of the complaint process, knowing who could review or who oversaw the complaint. So if someone was raising, they knew exactly who was going to be reviewing it or who would be seeing it. So and that was important for them on the level of safety, with the concern that if they raise a complaint, would they risk losing access to the supports the university was offering them? Would they risk punitive measure from the university or from the academics that they might be complaining, or whoever the complaint may be raised against? So part of what we have worked with in a current plan, hopefully when it gets done, is to look at correcting those things so it's more explicit about what the process looks like, who's going to be reviewing it, who has touch to it, but then also looking at ways to provide avenues for external, like the student ombudsman that's been raised previously, but the external levels or levers that the students can use to raise it if they don't feel safe enough to do it within the organisation. Ideally, we'd like to have that obviously resolved within the organisation so the organisation can grow and change to meet those needs that students aren't experienced or feeling that they need to raise a complaint against. But it's important for what has come out of it is that there is choice for our students to be able to make the one that suits them best and will support and make them feel safe enough to have their voice heard and raised. I don't know if that actually answers the question, but that's how we sort of handled the complaints with our disability access and inclusion plan.
That's great. Belinda?
Yeah, and look, absolutely agree that there's a huge amount of work that needs to be done to make complaints processes accessible, easy to navigate, and effective for staff and students. But I'm thinking maybe Rowan's question is also going to that perennial issue in the disability space that, around change often only happening when individual people have the energy and resources to make a complaint about a specific issue. And I think maybe Rowan's asking, how are our plans actually addressing those broader systemic kind of changes that you need that, in fact, would take away the need for individual people to be having to pursue something in that way. So certainly I think our DAP has a mix of very specific kind of local improvements to particular issues, as well as trying to look at those broader systems improvements. So, embedding accessibility considerations into our digital procurement processes, for instance. My God, if we could get digital accessibility right, that would remove so many barriers and would remove that need for people to then be pursuing kind of complaints and discrimination processes. So I think maybe that might be where Rowan's question is going as well.
Okay, thanks, Belinda. There's another question here around I've too often experienced unis equating output achieved equals impact achieved. How do we ensure ongoing feedback after delivery to know initiatives and implementations are working as intended? Is there anything? I've kind of cut that down a little bit, but any responses to that?
Darlene, Sam here from Charles Sturt. I'm probably not answering that question entirely, but one of the great pieces of feedback we got in the consultation was, why doesn't an ideas wall exist all the time? So we had an ideas wall for the consultation for the plan, but that should be a permanent, and there are elements of ways to do feedback through institutions, but I think we need to make that easier than it is. And so, one of the undertakings from me is actually, how do we take that seriously as an institution? And I think that the plans hopefully help with complaints, just going back to that last question, in that we kind of, our consultation and feedback is finding where these pain points are, and we also hear about them in the way that we work. And so our plan is trying to prevent the complaints by fixing the things that are causing the problems. So, going back to that whole process of the poor student always having to advocate for themselves and register for support and get a plan and all of those sorts of things. I think that's very valid. And so it's more things that you can do outside of that process. So we're trying to think about not just linked to being registered with us, but what can we offer to students across the board that will help all students, whether you have a diagnosis or not. And so that kind of, and quite crudely, we have actually been, before this disability support funding and the broadening of allowing us to have more staff in our institutions to support the ever-growing number of students, we haven't had a lot of capacity to do too many proactive things, although we've tried. It's been a bit on the side. So this is an opportunity now, from my point of view, to actually, drive some of that change in a different way. So I'm not sure if I've answered.
That's great. Well, the conversation is rich and diverse, so keep it going. One of the questions is from EB. I've reviewed 2 brand new DAPs lately, both of which have regressed in terms of ambition since the previous iteration. The optimistic in me wants to believe this is about universities being pragmatic, but the realist and former HE governance practitioner says that ambition is generally shrinking. What is driving this, or is this something people have seen across the sector? Is Aaron, you're nodding, so do you want to?
Yeah, I would really love to answer this question as frank and honestly as I could, but recognizing I still work at the organization I'd be talking about or providing examples of, I have to be very careful. I agree with that sentiment, but I do also, with the DSF funding changes and the model changing, with the requirement for the governance committee, what I have found in the higher level stakeholder is that there is a lot that is coming in that's commanding the universities how we need to fix these social problems for the rest of Australia. And there's a bit of a reservation about who's responsible, that should be sitting with the government. So when it comes to how much they're looking to do, it's trying to work within their budget and their means, because in WA, well, at least in my understanding of the higher education sector currently, is that domestic student enrollments are falling, and there's the caps on international student places that we can have. So, and I think we talked earlier about restricted sort of resourcing currently across the sector as a whole. So that is really putting a limit on just how ambitious people are willing to be, because obviously their funding and the resourcing isn't there to do these big, grand actions that might revolutionize or change the system as a whole, which people with disability, which I'm a member of that community, having had a stroke 10 years ago. So I feel a lot of pain of my community when I'm consulting and talking to them about, it doesn't sound ambitious enough. It doesn't feel like it's going far enough. Why are we still having to advocate for these things? We're doing it for 10, 20, 30 years already. Does it feel tokenistic? And so the difficulty has been that there's been a resourcing withdrawal in the higher education sector as a whole, which makes, and as horrible as it sounds, for a lot of people, these are sort of nice to haves. Like, we're already doing well enough. Why are we having to do more? Is something I feel like I'm going to get in trouble. I mean, very, very frank. The universities seem to be doing well enough. Why are you asking for more? Why, when is enough for the community? When does it count off? And that's a very reductive view of the conversations that we had. But that is a sentiment I'm sort of carrying, and I'll probably get myself in a little trouble.
No, that's, and Aaron, please, don't put yourself in a difficult situation, but it is challenging as someone with lived experience. You are, you're advocating for yourself and for a community, and we need more people with lived experience in the sector to be able to speak freely and so forth. But it is still, we are all employed. So yes, I value you, and I value what you've said today. So thank you so much. Belinda.
Yeah, thanks, Aaron, for calling out those resourcing constraints and pressures. They are real, and they make this a very difficult environment to do this kind of work in. I guess my experience across our two DAPs is that, yes, the first DAP was very ambitious and it was intended to really garner attention and really push the university to do better. That said, some of those actions were never going to be achievable in the life of that plan. And I do think that there is there's a tricky balance to find between honouring what people with lived experience need and want to see and not making promises that you can't keep. There is nothing worse than a plan that overpromises, underdelivers, and leaves everyone feeling disillusioned at the end. So absolutely, I would have loved to have created a much more ambitious DAP, but I also recognised that we need to be very clear about what it is that we're promising to do.
Right, thank you.
Darlene?
Yes, Kate.
Just wanted to say,
Yep.
I think we really need to acknowledge that we're working within a system and we don't have control over so many things in the system, and that can make the work really hard. And I believe currently we're working in an environment where there is a lot more accountability for funding, what you're doing with the money, how you're spending it. But I think that scrutiny doesn't mean resistance. It could just mean tell me more. And so, yeah, I think it's just a difficult operating environment at the moment, but we cannot control. There's so much that we can't control.
No. And yeah, often to keep ourselves. I mean, I've been in the disability area for over 40 years. I still think I'm only 40, so I don't quite know how that happened. So, but it is a long, hard slog of advocating, and I really commend all those who continue to do that. Okay, we're really getting close to time, so I did want to offer the panel members, and I know we've got a lot of questions unanswered, but I did want to offer the panel member a chance just to kind of, one closing thought or, one thing that they may want to say kind of at the end of this. So I'll go around as a little Brady. I've got a little Brady bunch here. So I might start with you, Sam H. What kind of would you, as a final closing comment?
Yeah, thanks, Darlene. I guess as a closing comment, I think I've found through this process, people are incredibly generous about sharing their experiences, and how, wonderful it has been to be part of those conversations. And we really hope that our next plan is genuine and really does make a difference, really does make change. Another thing was that, in terms of being generous, I had very early when I very started this in this role, I reached out through the ADCET listserv and asked, is anybody developing a plan? Has anyone got time to talk to me? And I got a few responses, and I spent some time with Ashley Harrington and Harry Rogers from University of New South Wales, and they were so generous with me. And talked about their approach and their reflections, and that was really useful and really practical. So I guess one more thing. The other thing about this process is that, as well as all of the barriers, it really unearthed some of the fabulous practice that already exists in the university, some of the incredibly wonderful communities of practice and networks and teaching practice that is already happening. And it was really lovely to be able to see that and highlight that as well. So, yeah.
Fabulous. Thank you. Kate, I'll go to you next.
Probably just simply first listen before you write. And the other thing I would recommend is make sure that the plan is tied to university business. So it's in core university business.
Fabulous. Aaron.
Yeah, for me, the greatest thing would be starting with community, rather than starting with the stakeholders to describe or limit the action, the scope of action. So while community feedback might be ambitious, might go beyond what the university can deliver, that can always be tailored by the stakeholders later to what they can do and deliver. But if you're not listening to community to start with, then we're not going to be targeting the things that are affecting our current employees and students the most, and potentially our future ones who look to come here and study.
Thank you. Belinda.
I guess on the the plan thing, I would say invest the time in relationships, both the relationships that are formalized through particular structures and groups, but also those individual one-on-one relationships with the people doing the work. But I also just wanted to take the opportunity to thank all the panelists. I feel like I've learned a huge amount today, and like I've been taking copious notes. And thank you, thank you, Darlene, for making this happen. I think one of the things I've noticed around the DSF changes is that it really is forcing us to come together as a sector and have really interesting and tricky conversations about disability governance and planning, and that's got to be a good thing.
That's fabulous. Thank you, Belinda. Sam T.
To sum up for me, a dedicated resource is what's made a huge difference for our service rather than trying to do the plan alongside of other initiatives. So I really love the DSF funding that's given us that opportunity. I don't know if I'm Pollyanna, but I'm feeling pretty optimistic. I think even the worst of plans, all of us out there have got lots on our plate. And I think listening, that consultation piece that Sam has been able to do, and that rich data that we have to know what the pain points are and to be able to give those to stakeholders, to give meaning to them in their own areas about what people have, staff and students have said, has just been invaluable. So, maybe when you see our plan, you might not think it's the best plan in the world, but it's a journey. And it'll certainly, for me, because this plan is informed on that stronger consultation, lived experience, with an ability to actually fund some initiatives rather than as business as usual out of normal budgets, to actually move the dial on some things. So we're not advocating that there's one perfect way, but I just think if you take on some of those principles that we've all shared today and to reach out and use this as everybody as a network, I think this is a very rich area for not reinventing the wheel and sharing information. And Sam talking about what a difference that made in shaping our plan. If we can learn from each other and share and also hear that when things aren't perfect, they're often not perfect everywhere, and there's something kind of kindness in that hug from understanding we don't always get everything right, but I think we're all trying to come from a good place with an intent to do that, and I think that's our responsibility. Yep.
Well, thank you. I really don't want to say too much now because I think all of you have actually summed up and said some fabulous things at the end of that. So I just want to encourage the audience to either give love or claps to our panel member. Thank you so very much. We had a huge number of registrations, and we've actually kept a significant amount of the audience even at an hour and a half. So I thank everybody for joining us online, but mostly thank you to the panel for the discussion. Also, the chat has been going off and we've had lots of questions that we haven't been able to answer. So a hugely engaged audience as well. So thank you, panel members. Thank you so very much. I just want to thank our captioner, Helen, for her fabulous work, because some of us do talk a bit fast. Thank you to the ADCET team in the background. This, as I said at the beginning, this has been recorded. An email will be sent to you with the recording, and it will be made available on the ADCET website in our newsletter in the coming weeks. We're putting in I've actually lost the chat now, but we're putting in a survey, which I think is in there. So please fill that in. It'd be lovely if people have the chance to kind of say, what did they think about a panel discussion? What do they think about an hour and a half? Is it too much? I commend the panel for staying with us and the audience. So fill in that survey. We also have a sign up for our newsletter that helps you keep up to date with what is happening. And just to let you know, we do have 2 webinars coming up. One's called Show Me Your Poster, which is a follow-up from our UDL symposium that we hosted in June. We had technical difficulties with our poster presenters, so they couldn't actually present to the virtual world. Some of them were there physically, so they were able to talk to the physical audience, but couldn't virtually go out. So that's on the 17th of September. There'll be some information going up soon. So it'll be about Show Me Your Poster from the UDL Symposium. And then another one we've got is UDL in Higher Education Campus Implementation Criteria, which is being developed by some colleagues in the USA, which is happening in October the 1st, and that will be 10 a.m. our time. So sorry, WA, that will be a bit early for you guys, but trying to negotiate the time difference between America. It's hard enough to do it in WA sometimes, but with America and the eastern states. So that's coming up as well, and that will also be up on the website. So thank you all. We're right on time, and thank you so much for joining us, and have a great day all. Bye bye.